Well, I've missed a few of these Thursday ones. What have you guys been working on?
Well, I of course wasn't on last Thursday, but uh, we've been working on the character of God studies, but deeper and bigger questions if we don't have new people. So we haven't been like doing the intro part. So tonight, actually, I don't remember. I don't know what did you guys work on last week, John? Anything? Or you weren't there either because you were down
I
at
was
Kaylee.
on just on the Sabbath one.
Yeah, on Sabbath. So Charlie was actually leading out last week. Were you on Shady last week? Where'd Shady go? Anyway, I was assuming that we were on the sanctuary this week. What'd you guys work on?
What'd you say?
What'd you guys work on last week? Were you on?
I was not.
Okay.
So on Sabbath we worked on like a grain of mustard seed.
Yeah, the next parable.
Yeah.
Which will be on the next one this Sabbath. But tonight, anyway, it should be Barb. It should be on sanctuary. So that's going to be Old Testament, sanctuary, law, anything relating to that, which of course connects to the cross, the gospel, and the Messiah. But also sometimes there's other stuff that somebody's got more pressing to work on, which we do, whatever you guys want. So you got anything on your list, Barb?
I can't think of any specific questions. We kind of have been. It's funny, Shidi, because it seems like sometimes we go ahead and then we like back up and start over a lot of things, and I think we're further behind in Hebrews than we were last time.
I mean, because you backed up and then didn't get started?
Well, like we read through the whole thing, and then a couple of different things caught our eye, and we've been talking about them. And I don't know. I feel like we got back to where we were when we discussed it with you that one time. But we did sit down one night and tried to get through the whole thing, each of us on our own.
Yeah, Hebrews is certainly about the sanctuary stuff.
Yeah.
It's kind of a fun book because it's Paul trying to straighten out the meaning of the sanctuary, and the difference between salvation by shadow and salvation by the real Messiah. So it's pretty good. So I don't know if you guys got anything fresh you've been working on there. That'd be fun to just hear what you guys are working on with Hebrews. We had a good weekend last weekend. Kaylee got married, my oldest daughter, and had some fun Bible studies there with John and Charlie, a friend of ours down there, and some other people. So that was.
Have you heard any more from Becca?
Yeah, I've been just texting her a little bit. Becca is John's niece, and she graduated Milo last year, and she showed up this last weekend when I was down there and seemed ready to discuss some things about God. So we had fun doing that. The update, John, is just that the reading assignments that I gave her, she's working on them. And so I'm just kind of waiting for her to get through reading them to her satisfaction. And then we'll get together with her and see what she came up with and what she wants to work on next. So I'm kind of waiting for her to define how she'd like to do that.
Yeah.
Whether she wants to get on a regular schedule or just whenever she feels like she's finished some material and wants to talk about it. So she hasn't really said yet. So, but I've texted her at least every other day, so she doesn't feel like I'm chasing her too much. I'm trying to tell her. She told me that the hardest thing for her would be being regular about studying. So I'm assuming she wants it like school. So until she says otherwise, I just keep asking her, "Why did you get your assignment done yet?"
Kalal posted in chat a video of the 500 people that came to listen to the gospel.
You gonna play that for us?
Sure. Yeah, hold on. Let me do a screen share here. Just a short little thing, but gives you an idea of what we've been supporting through Kalal's hard work and
Yeah.
through the providence of the Lord. Let's see.
Paul, did you guys get a bunch of books ordered? Oh, here's the video.
Oh, that's Kalal preaching.
Yeah.
Look at all them colors.
Yeah, it reminds me of being in India.
It's the end of the video.
Cool.
Got some photos too.
That is a lot of people.
Yeah. Got some hand raising. I'm not sure why. Fill the whole heart.
It's raising hand for that they are, want to know Jesus, and there is a lot of people, 150 plus people who are willing to take Jesus Christ through baptism.
Nice.
All right.
So we are working on it to teach them, and soon we will have the baptism program. So
Yeah, that's wonderful. Look at them reading.
Wow.
What books were you
and
able to share,
there
Kalal?
were five. Yeah, we had only 500 only food, the packet food with the rice and potatoes and the dal we cooked. And we saw there is almost a 500 plus people. So we prayed, and there is a great blessing that we really appreciate to God. His real blessing in our lives, as He really truly loved us, though we are sinners. But He really blessed, and when we shared, we passed out all the foods. There were still 10 packets left after giving 550 peoples. So we really appreciate and thanks to God. And it was really possible through you all, as your loving support not only touch every heart, but it's, that if we really deeply see that it's really touched and even given the new life through Christ as they knew. Yeah. And we also passed out 550 plus spiritual book, the Step to Christ and the Desire of Ages book.
Oh, nice. Yes. 2 great books. Wonderful.
How are you able to follow up with them and talk to them? Or do you have some other people that are helping you with that?
Yes, everyone was so happy to have all this. And, before starting the spiritual meeting, they were saying that please preach more, not songs only, but preach, share the good news more, as we always, stay and want to hear a lot. So please give us more. So we were so amazed that how people were so much willing about his great love and truth. So it's also touched on my heart too, that their eagerness to hear the good news of God.
Good. That's good. It's good they have a book,
Yeah,
so
this
even if you're
lady
not able
is
to
hold
talk to them again, they can read.
the Desire of Ages book. They much appreciate for this great time as they had.
Cut you off. Sorry.
I see that we see mostly young ladies in the group. Are the men standing in the background, or is it just
Yes,
mostly
yes.
attracting young ladies?
Yeah, they are, the young ladies and the women, they really like to stay in front. And there is the men who are um, behind and the side and the middle. So
Yeah. Well, that's cool, Kalal. That's really awesome. We're just praise the Lord, and we thank you that you're doing that, able to do that, and willing to do that. It's a blessing for us to see and to even have a small part in that. So thank you.
yes, till your loving support saved 150 plus and more through Jesus Christ as they continue know and they accept Him
So what's the next plan?
as
Do you
their
meet with them as a
real
big group
Savior,
again?
not the. Uh, I'm continue thinking about this, and we're praying about this program for the next. So hoping that He will guide and He will lead according to. We will move forward with His guidance.
Yeah.
Kalal, it looks like all you needed to be doing was standing in the river while you preached, and then the baptism can just commence.
Yes, sir. Beside there is a pond, but the pond was,
Dry?
it was just not dry, but the pond's water is polluted with the
Oh,
bacteria and others. So that's why we didn't do that.
so you have to wait till a different season, or you got to go to a different water.
It's a season changing. Even the water, also the pollution.
So when does the water come good?
It comes good when rainy season, when rain falls, it's
Oh,
good.
okay.
So everything goes out and everything.
Beautiful.
Good.
Nice videos and pictures. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you all for your loving support, as it was truly possible through you all, as He guided us, all of us, and given them a new heart, new spirit in Christ.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
So what's the status now? Have you been able to order more books, or did you order books
Yeah,
and you gave them all away?
I talked with our Adventist institution here, but they have not enough right now because already they've given me, so they don't have.
So they're
And
going
we
to
are
take a
thinking
little while
about
to print more.
Yeah, we are thinking about to bring from India.
Oh,
So India printing section is good, and they are able to give us. So we are
very
thinking
good.
about. Yes.
Very good. Very good. Well, turning to our study subject tonight, anybody got someplace they want to start on something that you want to work on in regards to sanctuary, gospel, Old Testament? We're tonight would be on the sanctuary anyway, so we just see if we anything there you're going to cover. Anything, Barb, from Hebrews you guys been working on? Or
I just
Shady?
messaged you.
Oh,
we were
me?
talking about I need to look right now in Hebrews about Jesus learning his own obedience through suffering. What
Oh yeah.
where was that? And we were more discussing like the differences of how we interpreted that, I guess. I think that was one of the last times that I met with Barb. And I'm really sorry I don't have the reference right in front of me. But I interpreted it as
I'm thinking, was it 5? I'll go look.
Should be in 5. Looking now.
okay, yeah, it's 5:8 is the specific verse that talks about learning his obedience. I took it as it's easy to say you're obedient, but then it's different when you actually live out the suffering that you can see your obedience. So I was thinking about him in the desert, like he knew that he was obedient, but he actually lived his obedience in the desert.
Well, I think it, I mean,
Yeah, preach. It's okay, Barb. We can hear you over that. Keep going.
I mean, I think we understand that, it's not like he was ever disobedient.
No.
So like that's already clear in my mind that he's always been obedient in a sense and never disobedient. I'm not sure what the things he suffered made it any different.
I was thinking about if he was out in the desert and he was being tested. We know that he was always obedient, but if he was never tested, how do we actually have proof that he was obedient?
I mean, you could say his whole life, I guess you could call it a test, but more like a demonstration, like maybe he proved it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, so Shady, you're right, because it's one thing for God to say, I love you. It's another thing for him to come down here and suffer as a human, meaning with all the frailties of human body, human existence, and stay true to I love you, right? So when we put in context the obedience, it wasn't just about arbitrary tests that God made up for him. It was really the test, the obedience test was, would he stay true to the already expressed character of God, like in in Exodus, where it describes him as the Lord God, gracious, long suffering, and all that. But when you have a high and mighty power that can shake the mountain and burn it with fire, and then say, but I'm gracious and kind and merciful. It's a little bit, it's like, really? So for him to be in a body, which is the sanctuary, in a tent, right? And for him to dwell among us so that we could see it would be the purpose that you were pointing to, Barb. But simultaneously, we get to see, yeah, and he didn't stray from that even a little bit. So if he didn't stray from it when he was under all that pressure, all that attack, why would he ever in the hereafter, right? So that it's really about giving us confidence in the fact that God already said that he's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and he changes not. But to demonstrate it so that we can see it was what was important. And then the last element I think here about the learning is a little bit connected to the fact that Jesus started over when he was born. So he wasn't born with all of that back knowledge, back experience from being alive in eternity with his Father before anything was created. He had to learn that. So the Old Testament itself, reading the scriptures and learning the sanctuary, for instance, that was as new to him. He didn't come with a pre-recorded brain that had all of that but in there. He's learning it just like we would from scratch, learning about the love of his Father from scratch, but he had it in him, and so that ended up staying consistent. So you're really talking about the nature of Christ a little bit, like what did it mean to be born all man and all God? Because in character and spirit, he was 100% God, and in flesh, he was 100% man. And really that's what Paul is sort of pointing to. But I like the fact that it has that element for us that we can look at Christ and we can know for surety what it looks like for him to be loving, to be kind, to be gracious, to be consistent. And that's really what's tied to that idea of he learned or became obedient, even unto death, I think is what it says in the King James. Obedient even unto death. So that's all wrapped up in there together.
So maybe I should say, I guess a better way of putting it is that he lived his obedience.
Sure.
Instead of, I don't know how I was wording it earlier. Maybe I was wording it in a way that was.
No, you were fine, because the learned part is the fact that all this was new to him, meaning he didn't bring his eternal past memories with him, right? So learning, like in the wilderness, to go through being famished and choose obedience to his Father over taking care of himself, that was new experience. He had it when he was a kid in smaller ways, but now he went through it in a very big way, just like he had never even in eternity been separated from his Father before. But that's what he went through at the cross. So is it wrong to say that he learned some things or had new experiences? No, that's not wrong, especially when we're connecting it to the idea that he was made human and he started from the beginning, just like that newborn baby that Barb's got. He didn't have any more knowledge when he was born as an infant than Barb's new infant has, which is kind of hard to wrap our brain around. So I think you said it fine both ways. It's true, he demonstrated obedience, but it's also true that in the human sense, he had to learn it. Does that make sense to you, Barb?
Yeah, it makes sense that way. I'm not sure. I kind of missed a few of your points because I had two boys
okay.
crying, but I guess I'm not sure. When I see he learned obedience, I can see learning it as a human. He learned obedience through suffering I guess I struggle with, how the suffering made him learn it. I get it. I get that he demonstrated it, but
Yeah, and demonstrate would be just as correct of a statement, because you're right, he never was disobedient. So it's not like he was doing trial and error kind of learning, like, okay, I disobeyed 3 times, now let me see if I can get it right. It wasn't that. And I think the trials or the suffering had more to do with testing his obedience than really in this English context of learning, which is probably what you're having struggle with there. So it tested his obedience.
and then that gets me to think about, well, is that, does God test people? Back to a question of which, I know there's language, even Ellen White was using that says yes, in some way.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand it's not for his benefit. It's not a test he needs you to pass to prove your loyalty. If there's tests and trials we go through, the 2 things that it's for is, 1, for our learning. And then when it's about success, meaning we submit and surrender like Jesus did, then it's about demonstration, but not to God. God already knows the heart. God knows what's in there. Even when we fail and give into our weakness, he knows what's in there. Like he said to his disciples, I know that your spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. That's some deep sort of understanding of their hearts. So if there's tests, or like Sister White's talking about, he will test us and try us or put us through. She talks about it in context of through the fire, like the cleansing fire, right? Like, so that's learning, growing, polishing, burning the dross out and being left with pure gold. So there's that, but that's for our benefit. And then of course the secondary is for the benefit of those who would learn or be benefited from seeing God likeness in you.
I think of a teacher who, teachers give tests, and the tests, in our everyday life, unfortunately, some tests are given just to say, yeah, no, you're not smart enough, get out of here. But a test can also just have the purpose of showing a student where they're at, and maybe even where they kind of need help. And if you have a teacher who's never going to give up on you, as long as you're there and you're striving to learn and grow, we have a teacher who, even when we fail a test, right, that teacher is a master teacher who can take that failure and turn it into something good and help us to actually grow out of it and to become better through it. So, I think how a test is used and it ultimately comes down to who is the teacher giving the test. What is their character? What are they like?
Well, and so that actually goes to, I think, what's fun is to grab the main point of this chapter, which kind of begins back, and it's connected to the verse you're starting this off on, but back in verse 2, which is kind of the middle of a sentence. So that's kind of, well, no, it starts there, I guess. He can have compassion on those who are ignorant and going astray, since he himself has also been subject to weakness. And there again, that verse is not saying that he wasn't compassionate, and then now that he suffered like us, now he can be compassionate on us. It's not that at all. He was compassionate before. What that is that we couldn't know with surety that he had that level of compassion. We could always throw it back at him and say, wow, but you don't know what it's like to be us. But now we can't, right? Now we can't throw that back at him. And we have seen that he knows what it is to be human, and even in suffering and sorrow and pain. And so now we can look at him and go, yeah, he really does know us. He really does understand. And like John was saying, he's not here to test us, to try to keep us out. He's here to work with us, to bring us in. And so to know that compassionate Savior as the high priest is kind of what chapter 5 is really about as a whole. Anything else?
Yeah, imagine if you had a college professor who started off the bat saying, okay, I'm your teacher. And by the way, I'll be your teacher for your whole rest of your life. And I will never leave you or forsake you. I will always be there to help you to learn and grow. It doesn't really work like that in our system, but that's what God is offering.
So that's a good one out of Hebrews. Anything else? Thoughts on Hebrews, anybody? Charlie, did Charlie leave us? I guess Charlie left us. I was wondering if he finished working on Hebrews, but he's gone. Well, how about on a different subject other than sanctuary Hebrews? Anybody else got something want us to work on tonight? I think it's kind of exciting, knowing the connection between Hebrews, for me, between Hebrews and those pictures and videos we just saw of Kalal, because that was about the cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary.
I think it's funny because last time we discussed Hebrews, it was Hebrews 5:7, and now it's Hebrews 5:8. We made it so far.
Wow.
We progressed the whole verse. Charlie, you're back. We were working on stuff in Hebrews. We were curious, did you finish working on Hebrews, and do you have anything else you wanted to either share or bring up out of Hebrews since tonight's sanctuary topic?
Oh, I'd love to, but I don't have it sitting on the top of my head. So yeah, I've gone through it. My internet was really bad, so I had to try to figure something out to get it working.
Okay.
If you don't mind, Bobby,
yeah, what?
Expound on that idea of the cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary.
With videos and images from Kalal's report?
Yeah, well, I mean, I know that has to do with the fact that they're responding to the gospel, but help us with your connection between those two things.
Sure. Well, the cleansing, the heavenly. It's funny because in our Adventist theories in the past, we kind of went through a few different things. One was, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Back in the early 1800s, we thought, oh, that means God's coming to cleanse the earth, purify it, destroy all the wicked, and so on. And then, of course, it didn't happen. So then after that, we got onto the idea, it's the heavenly sanctuary that needs to be cleansed. And then in the late 1800s and on into even till recently, we kind of were in this back and forth discussions and debate. Some saying, yep, the heavenly sanctuary has got to be cleansed. And then others saying, well, what up there would be dirty? Why does it need any cleansing up there? Because we envision a physical building up there that Jesus is in, and he's walking back and forth, or I guess now maybe he's, after 1844, he's only in the most holy place. But anyway, we see it as this physical building is up there doing something. And it is kind of a stretch on the brain to think about, so what exactly is dirty up there that needs to be cleansed? And I think just to add some other pieces, we've even gone down the route of, just the fact that sin still exists is a blight on the heavenly sanctuary. So maybe it's sort of that, but I think the best connection of all is one, that to understand what got the sanctuary dirty in the first place, whether it's the heavenly or the earthly, no matter where you physically place it, it's really just a story about from the very beginning of Satan beclouding the minds first in heaven, which is where the heavenly sanctuary would have been, clouding the questions about God, throwing doubt and fear and so on into the minds of angels. And then, of course, that spread down to earth, where we have the earthly sanctuary and as a pattern of the heavenly. And so anyway, long story short, when I say that, it's a connection. When I see those pictures, I see the heavenly sanctuary being cleansed. I also see the earthly sanctuary being cleansed, but specifically to the heavenly, it's about the opportunities of all those people sitting there in those pictures. If Kalal, for instance, is sharing with them a correct view of God in contrast to whatever else they might have heard, that's the activity of cleansing the heavenly sanctuary. It's to have the hearts and minds of the people be able to hear and then taste and see and know a picture of the one and only true God, which is life, right? John 17:3. So really the heavenly, cleansing the heavenly sanctuary in the subject of 2300-day prophecy, as well as Hebrews and everything else about the ceremonies of the sanctuary, was really about God clearing away the things that perverted the knowledge and understanding of who he is and what he is. And so anytime that activity is going on, that's the cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary. And then if the people hear it and accept it, and it moves into their life, and their life is changed by this beautiful knowledge about God, then that would be the activity of cleansing the earthly sanctuary, which are, of course, the people, because our favorite verse, although we keep using it for food, or I should say the favorite verse we often use for food, really is in the context of hearts, purified hearts. And that's the know ye not that your body is the dwelling place for the living God. So that's a earthly vessel, tent. What else did they call it? Temple, sanctuary, earthly place for the Heavenly Father Spirit to dwell. And since the scripture also says he dwells not in temples made with hands, then it certainly isn't about our buildings. Cannot be. Yeah. And then of the heavenly sanctuary, it refers to that as the temple erected without human hands by God. And that would be Jesus Christ himself. So.
So what is the date of 1844 or whatever correlate to that? The verse in Daniel.
Does that fit? So Paul talks about when he was writing before he died, he wrote to the people and he said, don't be afraid as if the second coming has already happened, because first must come a falling away. So apparently it was explained to him that there was going to be a great falling away from the truth. He wouldn't have necessarily known how far away or how long it would take or how bad it would be. But since we're looking backwards, we can see that great falling away went all the way down to the darkness level of the Dark Ages, which is only paralleled by about what we got going on now, meaning we're back to that huge level of darkness, and the real truth being just a little bit here and there. But that's what it was when Jesus came. And the Desire of Ages talks about how the character of God had been marred, the truth had been marred, had been blackened and darkened, and Jesus came to set all that straight, which he did. So in the context of Jesus there coming 2,000 years ago, he then physically walks in and flips over tables, basically to say, I'm here to cleanse the sanctuary because you've turned it into a den of thieves. And he was the light that would shine in the darkness or in the sanctuary to bring back its true knowledge, if I'm just running with all these parallels. So 1844 was prophesied before Paul said there would come a great falling away, to talk about the time period that it would take and the time frame in future history, at least for Paul, as to when would it be that the cleansing or the Day of Atonement would begin. And the Day of Atonement is really about the activity, the physical activity of symbolically purging the temple from sin. Now, it's kind of interesting because we've also gotten into sort of bantering back and forth about sin, and is it like in a bucket and we can actually move it around, and so we see it go from the sinner to the lamb's head, then from the lamb to the altar of incense, and then on Day of Atonement, that's all cleansed using blood, which is another weird thing. How are we going to cleanse anything with blood nowadays? Boy, I was at the doctor today and I had a little cut on my toe that they were going to look at, and there's a little bit of blood, and everybody acts now like, man, we're going to get sick and die from blood. You gotta, anyway. So how are you going to cleanse this with blood is part of that whole symbol puzzle. But in a simple terms, this was God telling the story of how sin, the guilt of sin, was really on the one who done it at first, or who it looked like done it. And that would have been the sinner, the one who killed his brother or, broke the law in some format. But then God comes along and he says, no, they're not guilty because they don't know what they're doing. And he moved the guilt and blame sort of over to himself. And so in the era between the cross and now, it's sort of just been accepted, what I call sort of the holy place understanding that Jesus took all the responsibility for sin. He took it away. And so he's calling man not guilty. And so he's going to take the fault for it. He's going to pay the price for it. He's going to do all this. But that's not the end of the story. And the puzzle challenges us with, okay, wait a minute now, if Jesus already died for us and that took care of sin, then why do we got to go moving the sin into the most holy place, sprinkle it on the Ark of the Covenant, and then bring it back out? And of course, I'm connecting the blood sin being carried by the blood. So the blood was sprinkled on the Ark of the Covenant, signifying now that we're going to cleanse the heavenly sanctuary from sin. And now we're going to bring it back out and we're going to place it on the scapegoat. And suddenly here comes how to make that connection, Barb, that you're asking about. And that is that the conclusion of the Day of Atonement, or the process of atonement, isn't just to declare man not guilty, but to then show through time and experience that man can become purified, even though he was sinful. And he can become purified only through the work and the power of Christ's life, which is in the blood. And so the blood symbolizes Christ's life, now alive, not dead, working in man, changing man. But then heaven's still going to say, well, then wait a minute. So if man's not guilty because he didn't know what he was doing and Christ fixed that, where is the fault for all of this? And that's when now the cleansing of the sanctuary has to do with moving the guilt in our understanding fully back off of God, who was never guilty for it in the first place, but took responsibility as if it were guilt, went through death, separated from God, second death, to be able to say that, man, trust me, you are free in me, I will fix you, and so on. And now the final blame comes down on the scapegoat, which of course is Satan. And right there, when we don't tell the story that way, our other version of that, of what I'm saying, sort of leaves the other churches out there with a question, well, how come you have to have two saviors? You had to have the Lord's goat, and now you got to have a scapegoat. Well, the scapegoat is not a savior. The scapegoat has nothing to do with the savior. It has to do with the universe including man, even the wicked, recognizing and understanding that the blame really wasn't Adam and Eve. It really wasn't God. It wasn't Jesus. It was really the whole problem is there with Lucifer. So when you have that whole story, then back to your question, Barb, what's 1844? And here it is. 1844 was the date in the future from when it was written that God said, look, it's going to take way down to there, but when we get there, now God talking, saying, I am going to begin the process of finishing this. How? By revealing the fullness of what's in the most holy place, that's the character and glory of God, and bringing it all the way back around so that the universe can understand justice and mercy, which is the Ark of the Covenant, the truth about God's character, which is the law inside the Ark of the Covenant, taking dead sticks, that's sinners, and filling them with life, which Christ was the first pattern of that, or the first fruits. So you have everything that's in the most holy place, and most importantly, the Shekinah glory, which is God's character revealed, now shedding light all the way back out through the what I'm going to call the holy place, and back out into the courtyard, and all the way out into the court of the Gentiles, flooding it with light, which in other verses it'll talk about flooding the earth, or all the people on the earth with this great light. So 1844 was a time when humanity could grab on to God's promise. I mean, think about being, living in the 1700s and the 1800s, and how it seemed like this painful drudgery and darkness would never end. And then to be able to grab onto this idea, this message that, hey, there is actually a defined ending or finale coming, and when it's scheduled. And that's why they got all excited in 1840, 1838, 39, 40, and so on in there, getting ready for the only part that they didn't understand then was this was about the time to learn the truth about the gospel in its fullness and declare it to the world. It wasn't the time for Jesus to physically show up yet. So we're still in that phase of activity that definitely began in 1844, and we're still in it right now.
Do we
Would you say
have time tonight to go over what is 1844?
Sorry, say that again, Shady.
Is tonight the appropriate time to go over what 1844 is?
Sure.
I know that I think Barb and I have briefly touched it. Is that there was like a controversy that happened? And
Yeah,
that was the 1888 that we talked about. The 1844, the part that I'll let Bobby say it, but there's a verse in Daniel that talks about unto 2300 days, then the sanctuary will be cleansed. And that was used by William Miller to establish that date of the cleansing of the sanctuary they thought was going to be Christ's second coming. And I don't know if you remember, I think we talked about briefly, and we didn't dwell on it, but we talked about the great disappointment.
Yes.
And they thought on October, well, it ended up, they changed the date several times, but October 22nd, 1844 was the final date that they thought this is it. And a lot of people came out of different churches, including Ellen White out of her church, and a bunch of people very excited about Jesus is coming. And what I understand from it is, it was a big letdown for everybody, but a lot of churches, including eventually the Adventist church, came out of that because people came away studying, what did we get wrong? What's the truth? And people were studying a lot, which makes me wonder, Bobby, was that why that date was chosen? Was it kind of like the date didn't really matter, but people got excited about the date, even though they had the wrong understanding of it? So they studied more, and that's where it started opening up for people.
Well, studying more is always a good effect. So, but if I understand your question right, is part of the question, that the date is or isn't important so much as just starting to study?
I mean, I guess what I'm understanding, and I'm not sure if I understand it correctly, but that the date you were saying that it was sometime between the Dark Ages and now, and God knew the time. I don't know why 1844, but that somewhere between there he would begin to reveal more about the truth of himself, and that's through the study of his word. But William, so it seems like it would be maybe, though it would be very disappointing that William Miller misunderstood what it was, but out of that came a movement of renewed study. So was that the effect God was going for, to start the cascade of revealing his character? Is God was trying to get the people motivated to study more? I mean,
So
I'm trying to make sense of that date stuff.
well, so let me start by saying, so Shady, I'm gonna work on answering your question too, but I'm also gonna say that a while back, a few months ago or so, we did the actual calculating of this date, step by step. That wasn't interesting at the time to you, and actually hardly anybody showed up when we did it, but we can go through that if that's really your question. But I think your question just is more in general. So let me keep answering Barb's question, and I'll top it off by answering your question, Shady. So
I can also go back and watch that because John recorded it.
that could be.
Yep.
I don't. Is it recorded, John?
Yeah, that one's on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
So
can watch. I can watch that, and then we can revisit. That way, we're not.
Yeah, or I might need more practice, and you might need to have me do it live again. But anyway, either way. So Barb, the date is actually very real, very specific, and it is that date. There's nothing wrong with the math and the calculation of that date. And God very specifically, clear back in Daniel's time, was pointing to that date. But the question is why? So if I were to say, for instance, let's think about Israel, Egypt, coming out of Egypt, going to the promised land. If God had said on a certain date that he was going to deliver his people into the promised land, would you say that the date Moses showed up should have been the date that God stated, or should it have been the date when they got to Sinai, or the date when they actually went in, or where would have been the right point in time to place that date for the story of Israel?
For a date that they got into the promised land, I guess I'm a purist. I would say the date they actually got into the promised land.
Yeah, if the prophecy said on this particular date, I will deliver my people to the promised land, we would typically expect it to be the date they crossed over the Jordan physically, right? But it's just as correct for God to say the day that he sent Moses, the first time Moses walked in and said to Pharaoh, the Lord God, the creator God, has said to let my people go. That would have been a right date, correct date, right on. Because beginning then was the process of getting them to the promised land. And how long do you think it was between when Moses walked in and when they got into the promised land?
Well, it was at least the 40 years plus a few.
Okay. And again, that would be if we were expecting the statement to be related to physically walking in to a physical address, right? But Paul in Hebrews makes a statement about those that were in the 40 years that they would never enter his rest. And then later, then he says, and those that went in, did they actually enter the promised land? They didn't either. So when God says, I'm going to deliver on this date, my people unto the promised land. And he's referring to fully redeemed from the earth, transformed, and dwelling with him in complete peace. Has that happened yet? But see, this is how God talks, and this is how God communicates often. We see it in other places and other patterns where he states this is going to happen here. For instance, he took Abraham out of the Ur of the Chaldees, and then even when Abraham got into Canaan, he wasn't yet in the promised land. Paul points that out by the fact that Abraham entered in, but he never owned a piece of property, not even a square foot of dirt. So has the promise that God gave Abraham even yet been fulfilled? So I think when we read this, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. We should be open-minded enough to let God communicate over time what the actual meaning of it is. So 1844 is dead correct date. What I see is for God to begin the Day of Atonement. Now, the fun part about the Day of Atonement, and I'm not trying to calculate more dates after 1844 with this, just to say that on any given Day of Atonement every year, when the priest would go into the most holy place to communicate face to face with God, there was no specific time frame that would take. It could be as much as 9 hours. That would be from the morning sacrifice to the evening sacrifice. It could be as much of that time, but no longer. But it could also be 15 minutes. Could be half hour, could be 2 hours. So the question for the people outside who are bowed down in that activity of purifying their souls before God, confessing sin, that was the activity they were in. They wanted to be renewed as God's people. That's what they were supposed to be doing anyway. They had no exact time frame as to how long before the priest comes back out. And I think that also corresponds to our time frame between 1840 or starting in 1844 until some point in our future, maybe near future, right? So we're in that space of time when the priest is ceremonially in that most holy place. That's the connection that Ellen White's really making about Jesus moving in that vision that, see, who had that vision? It was not Ellen White, Hiram Edson, was it? Had that vision about Christ moving into the most holy place. Then she had one called The End of the 2300 Days, which is in early writings, where the Father moved from the holy to the most holy, and then Christ moved and so on. Anyway, that connection isn't really about something physical activity that they're doing in buildings. That has to do with the work they're doing to move God's people from understanding to understanding, from grace to grace, all the way until we come to the full knowledge, as Paul puts it, the full knowledge of the grace of Christ and the mystery that was held through times eternal, so that there can be a conclusion to the Day of Atonement coming back out to the scapegoat. Now, interestingly enough, the scapegoat, that part of the activity in earth years will not occur until the end of the 1,000 years. So apparently this is a really long Day of Atonement that began in 1844. And the assurance that we're to draw from that is one, that God has a schedule and he's right on it. And he knows the schedule. He's not running behind. We have caused a delay, but he knew about that delay, just like with Israel. So his timetable is not thrown off. We should only use that knowledge to say, well, let's not keep causing a delay. Let's get off the delay program and let's get on to the get moving program. However, none of that is a surprise to God. God he knows what the schedule is. He stated the activity of bringing us out, the rest of the way out of the darkness into the full light would begin in 1844. That's its significance. And it's as significant really as the other time period dates that we have, like for instance, the 70 weeks and the 1 week where Christ would die in the middle of the week. These are all connected. So I do know about the one piece William Miller missed was the meaning of the cleansing of the sanctuary. Sister White, though, says that God purposely did not open that knowledge up. So she describes it as putting his hand over it. That's your connection, Barb, to the idea of needing to dig and discover and learn and to know what, because if we just figured it all out like math, we could say, oh, look how smart we are, look what we figured out. But we needed the disappointment, as we call it, as a very valuable part of the story to turn us from just a quick, shallow idea about cleansing the sanctuary and going to heaven, as if it were just about physically getting from here to there, and really have time over generations to get to where we're getting to now, which is to understand that salvation is really about a changed heart, not moving from point A physical to point B. So all of that needed to come. I think I should at least even throw in the connection of Sabbath, because part of that 1844 cleanse of the sanctuary has had a very deep connection to Sabbath, but not the Sabbath you and I grew up on, not the Sabbath that we have been involved in so far. It is about the Sabbath in Hebrews that really has to do with coming to a deep knowledge and understanding of God, to be able to rest in him fully, like to actually live the way Jesus lived, making no plans for yourself, not needing to know where your bread and sleep place is coming tomorrow, because you don't have to. You rest fully in him. And that's still a little bit challenging to us. So this
little bit.
This is where this is all going, though, because he is going to have a bunch of Jesus-like people, meaning those who follow the Lamb wherever he goes, doing it the way he does it, living the way he lived, teaching the way he taught, loving people the way he loved. That's the ending of the part of the Day of Atonement that will culminate in the physical second coming. But the Day of Atonement will not be done until after the 1,000 years. So let me pause there and just say, Barb, is that, I've got to check, at least see if I'm answering your question.
I'm not sure that every aspect is sinking in of what you've said, because I'm trying to, like, I feel like I know the gist of, I know the Day of Atonement in the Bible, kind of, and I'm just trying to put it all together with the prophetic, the type.
I can fully get that, because it's a lot of info. I just dumped 30 years of studying that topic on you. But hang on until you get it more clear for yourself. Hang on to the fact that 1844 is a real date, very specific date, an important date, but it's not a date that establishes our denomination as some special legitimate denomination. That's not a good use of that date. It's too narrow and too self-serving. However, 1844 did begin a revival, a reformation in the United States. There was 50,000, Shady, this is some details for your question, 50,000 people as we came into October 22, 1844, that were excited about the near coming of Christ, or the imminent return of Christ in a couple of days. They did give away their stuff because they didn't need it anymore. They gave away their gardens, the food in their gardens. They didn't even harvest because they weren't going to need it. And it's interesting, because often I heard that story as, whoops, they made a mistake. They shouldn't have got quite so overboard. And in truth, 50,000 people on October 22 were in their minds ready for Jesus to show up, expecting that. What they didn't know is we weren't near ready. And that wasn't really the event that was supposed to occur. But the part that was supposed to occur, they did put their nets down. And by that, I'm referring to the disciples 2,000 years ago, who did the same thing with, okay, we're done with our gardens and we're done with, right? So it wasn't that they made a mistake shedding their earthly connections, because that's what then suddenly made them turn and go, well, hold on now, what are we supposed to do now or understand? And God would have been thrilled if all 50,000 had asked that question and said, hey, we're already in this fully, just like Peter, James, and John. We just need God to explain to us what we're supposed to do next. Sadly, only 50 of the 50,000 did that. So it went from 50,000 to 50. But nonetheless, those 50 did ask that question, and God began to start to unfold the information that we're learning now. And there's a lot more to the story about rebellion and getting off track, and just like God's people's story all through the Bible, we have all that in between then and now. But for me, it's kind of an exciting thing to think that 50,000 people actually showed up to say, we want to be part of the second coming. Now, God did a Gideon. You know the story of Gideon, Shady?
No.
Okay, so that's an Old Testament story. That's okay. It's a fun one. It was after King David, King Solomon, and all that. And it was in a time when it was kind of regular that the Philistines and the Gibeonites and other tribes, outside of Israel, were harassing Israel, and Israel was not protected by God. They had turned away and rebelled, and so they did not have his protection. And so they were constantly barraged and badgered by these other nations around them. And there was a guy by the name of Gideon. He was just a wheat farmer, son of a wheat farmer, and he was working in the field, planting. And the trouble with working in the field was you never knew when the raiders were going to come through and steal whatever you had. So they kind of did it in secret, a little bit here, a little bit there, trying to harvest their crops before anybody noticed, that kind of setting. And in the middle of that, an angel shows up to talk to Gideon, and who is Christ, and he says, I want you to go out there and fight those Midianites. Well, Gideon's just a farmer, but Gideon asked for some signs, and there's a little bit of communication going on. The short version of the story is Gideon decided, okay, I'll do it. And then God said, okay, now call all the men of Israel together, anyone who's willing to fight. And they gathered, I think it was, anybody remember the numbers? It was like 120,000 men. It was a big number. And God said, okay, Gideon, that's too many. And you're thinking, too many? Well, how many of those Midianites have over there? They had way more than that. But God said, no, it's too many. So tell everybody who's either just gotten married, or they're afraid, or they're kind of old or whatever, just go home. So it went from 80,000 down. I think the next number was 20,000, just like that, boom. And Gideon's looking, he's going, man, now we got a tiny little army compared to the Midianites' army. And God said, yeah, but that's still too big. We got to get rid of some more. So Gideon marched them past the river, and any of the men who, while they walk in the water and they lap water, with their hand, but they don't stop, they get to be in the army. And any of them that stop and kneel down to get water, tell them to go home. Okay. So how many did that bring us down to? Anybody remember?
300.
So we went from 80,000 or 120,000, whatever the number was, down to 300 guys. And Gideon's looking and he's going, oh my word. And they got 150,000 out there or some big number. And so the cool part of the story is God then said, oh yeah, and you don't need swords necessarily. What you need is a torch and a pitcher to put over the torch and a trumpet. And Gideon's like, and we're going to fight these guys with that? And of course, I'm writing that into the story. He didn't really say that. But they got on three sides of the valley, and all at the right time in the middle of the night, they broke their pitchers so their torches came full bright, and they blew on the trumpets. And then God moved on the enemy, on the army, and made them afraid. And they thought there was hundreds of thousands of men coming. They're not going to win. And in their hasty escape, they were even killing each other. And so that whole army got routed by Gideon and 300 guys. And so the point of that story in relation to 1844, that is consistent with God's pattern. When he's got to do something big, one, he wants it done in a way that you can't claim it that the humans really did it. You know, their pitchers and their trumpets are not really going to rout an army very well, it doesn't seem. So it's going to be clear that it was God's doing. And he prefers smaller numbers than bigger, like 11 disciples out of 12 instead of 1,000. Now it grows low, right? Because you have the 11, and then you have the 150, and then you got the 3,000 that came in a day on Pentecost. So in the same way, when Gideon's army blew the trumpets and all that, as they were winning and the army was killing itself as it ran, a whole bunch of them other Israelites that went home heard what was going on, and they all grabbed their swords and they came out to help with the battle. Well, the cool thing is by then, nobody could say, yep, and look what those 80,000 or 120,000 men did, right? What did they do exactly? Well, they sort of chased off an army that was already beaten. God already ran them off, and they're just helping. So God always does it that way. So that we can learn these things happen through dependence on God, not dependence on man. So in that same way with 1844, it's really was part of the plan, Barb, that we'd have 50,000 who were excited about a second coming, but very shallow understanding of what that was or what was really needed to be ready, so that he could narrow that down to 50, so that some information could be learned, even if it was going to be rejected by most of them in 1888, and yet today still, but it was going to be written down. It was going to be as a gift that was specifically targeted to be delivered post 1844, so that some down here at the end would find that gift like a pearl in the field or a treasure chest in the field, and would give everything they've got to have it and to get the land to possess it, meaning the parable, and to then bring about the activity of the 144,000 or those who follow the Lamb wherever he goes, and to bring about enlightening the whole earth with the glory of Jesus Christ. That's what 1844 was really about.
But what seems really, sorry, Charlie, go ahead.
I'll go after you.
What, I guess the thing about the date that's on my mind right now is like, it's like the prophecy, the studying of that prophecy by William Miller and whomever else ignited the fulfillment of the prophecy. If that prophecy had not been in the Bible, would that revival have ever happened? Whereas, because you said it's a significant date as the 70 weeks, it's like the prophecy didn't make the 70 weeks one happen. I mean, Jesus was coming. To me, it seems like the date, I will just accept in faith that that was the date God deemed best. But I don't see specifically, it just seems like it could have been arbitrary, the date. I don't know. Whereas the 70 weeks is like, it was fulfilled in Jesus's coming and events that took place.
So the part, Barb,
Yeah.
that you said that's really important was that the prophecy does not dictate the event. The event was simply recorded by God before it happened, right? So the event dictates the prophecy. That's the same with the coming of Jesus Christ. God didn't write a prophecy and then the prophecy made him show up on time. He looked down into the future, knew when was the right moment to show up, and then wrote about it before he did it. He also looked forward in time to 1844 and said, that's the time when we're going to begin sort of this final phase, Day of Atonement, all these connections. But he didn't write it down and then make it happen. He saw that it would occur. So if the prophecy hadn't been written, part of your question was, would the revival have begun? And I would say, yeah, sure. God could have started that revival in many number of ways because it was the work of the Holy Spirit and the timing of God to do it. Just like there was a time when God knew would be the time to bring Israel out of Egypt. He also knew there would be a time to begin to clean up the confusion about God that would have been made post disciples through the Dark Ages into 1844. And to that, we actually see previous work on that, like the Reformation in Germany, right, with Martin Luther. We see other aspects of revival and Reformation, but there was something significant about 1844. And obviously, I'll never ask you to just accept it on blind faith. I'm saying now, hold on to the fact that it's important. Keep asking the question until you see with surety and clarity why it's an important date. But ultimately, it is about discovering, yeah, God, why not start that Reformation in 1744? Why 1844? I can't actually answer all of that. I have to take it a little bit on faith that God looked down from before sin and he saw there would be a fullness of time date that would be the right moment for Jesus Christ to be born. I don't know why 4,000 years first. I can understand a little bit, but all the details I don't. And in the same way, I know he looked down to 1844, but I don't know all the whys, but I do know what it's connected to. And for me, I guess at the moment, that's exciting enough to know something important, something special. And I didn't used to think it was very important and special when I just learned the standard calculation of the dates as an Adventist. It wasn't until I started to understand the connection about the truth about God being finally fully revealed as the cleansing of the sanctuary, then it started to really make a connection and a meaning for me as it connected to my upbringing, right? Anyway, Charlie, you had something.
Yeah, just the parallel that you kind of alluded to about Israel. There's the 430 years that they were in Exodus 12:40. The children of Israel who lived in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years that all the army of the Lord went out from the land. Night. It is a night of solemn observance to the Lord for bringing them out of the land of Egypt. So it's interesting that they started the journey then, like a special journey. It's not that they weren't learning things in Egypt, learning what not to do. They didn't know that, but then they spent how many years? 40 years in the desert on the way to this symbolic promised land. So there was no prophecy for 40 years. That was the part that just happened. And so, yeah, just overlaying that with now, we don't have any prophecy about the close of our journey through the wilderness or to come out of the wilderness. But this woman who went into the wilderness and isn't looking so pretty anymore is being called out of Egypt again to work its way through back into the wilderness and come out prepared.
So Shady, just to conclude on your question, the prophecies in Daniel, just quick summary, the prophecies in Daniel that said 2,300 days, which we calculate into years because the Bible actually specified that there should be a day for a year. So you take 2,300 days, turn them into years. And I won't do it tonight, but when we do all that date, and you're right, you can watch that because we already did it. It comes out that October 22, 1844 was the conclusion of the 2,300 days or years. And that 2,300 years at the ending, the prophecy, it just said that at the end of the 2,300 years, then the sanctuary would be cleansed. That's the whole thing, right? So in 1844, pre-1844, they worked on understanding how to calculate the 2,300 years and figure out when it ended. Tonight, mostly what I'm working on is what it meant to come to an end of the 2,300 days and what it then is the activity of the cleansing of the sanctuary. So coming full circle, I spent last weekend with a niece of John, who in her life is just diving into these big questions. And she was all excited to learn some stuff about God. We did wrath. That was one that was very significant to her. And then we actually got to the cross one, and it was kind of cute because she said, I didn't even know I had that question. But as she studies now for going forward here, that's going to become bigger and bigger and bigger. So that activity, which was just one person, and the pictures that Kalal showed us tonight with a whole bunch of people with their hands up saying they want to know how to become followers of Jesus Christ. That is the activity that was promised would occur after the 2,300 days, and very connected to not just church and putting up crosses and saying we're following Jesus, but actually really knowing the point of cleansing of the sanctuary is about cleaning out all the confusion that has been made about God. That's the significance to it.
Bobby.
So God was promising that that's what would occur. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, one of the understandings that I came to later in my Adventist life about 1844 actually came from reading, I believe it was kind of an autobiography, at least in part, by Ellen White. And it came from a couple of things. So growing up, I always understood the 1844 history to be proof that we were a prophetic movement, and that it was really about pinpointing the birth of our church, as if that was the most significant thing that happened. But then one day I was reading, and this was during the time I'm starting to learn the character of God stuff, starting to comprehend what that actually means. And I'm reading, Ellen White's autobiography, and she's describing the first time that she saw William Miller at a church. And she's not really discussing the theology behind his preaching. She brings up the point that he was a man who would come down from behind the altar, I think is what they called the pulpit, or he came down from behind the altar, and he came down to the floor to preach face to face with the people. And then she said it amazed her when a poor widow walked into the church, and he guided her in the middle of his sermon, guided her to an open seat. But the other piece that she brought up was that it was the first time listening to William Miller speak that she considered that God loved her, and that God actually was a loving God. So for me, the pieces that started to click together were, one, I'm learning about the importance of the character of God and understanding who God truly is. And here I see a woman who's she's talking about actually living in that time and what she was experiencing at that time. And it's amazing to me that the Holy Spirit at that time was starting to reveal the truth about God. And it's hugely significant if you consider the fact that actually the effect of the Dark Ages was still very strong all the way up to that point. And even leading after that point, the devastating effect that Catholicism and Romanism and all the false ideas about God that had permeated Christianity, and still to that day were permeating Christianity. And here's I don't know, call it a pinpoint on a map, pinpoint on a timeline, where God said, okay, this is the time when I'm going to start to reverse the effects of the Dark Ages. I'm going to start letting the light shine and bringing it out. Anyway, that's what I saw.
Yeah, which to connect to that last statement, John, every time that we are talking about God's character and you experience, any of you experience that, oh, I finally understand that about God, and it cleaned up an old lie, or you're sharing it with somebody and that's happening to them. That is the cleansing of the sanctuary activity. And that's what, what John's connecting to. So Barb, if it's been a while, your reading assignment for that question tonight is going to be in Early Writings. The little chapter is called The End of the 2300 Days. And I'm pretty sure you've read that before, because I think we've talked about it before, but after this discussion tonight, it's worth just reading it. Read it through. Don't try to necessarily figure it all out point by point. Just read it and start with the idea that God was saying after the 2300 days, this is what has to occur. What's in that vision. So that'll be fun to look at. Anyone else can read it too if they want, but I'm thinking specifically on that piece of discussion.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
I notice in the upper right corner, it says record. Yeah. My connection, I kind of missed a few things here because it kept booting me off. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, is there a way I can see this again?
Yeah, I gotta admit to you guys, I've been a little lax in putting all the videos together, but I will give my word that I will try and make sure this one gets posted. I do. They're all stored. I just haven't gone through to edit and process them. So
sometimes I wasn't sure if sometimes when it's a small group, if you always post them, but I would love to hear this one again somehow.
Yeah, if you see recording, it's on my hard drive somewhere. I purposely spent a little extra money on hard drive space, so I've got a lot of video on my hard drive.
Well, thank you. I look forward to.
I have two questions, and they don't have to be answered if it's going to take up a lot of time. The first one is this 1844 date worldwide, and we just don't know what happened in other places? Like, is it selfish to assume that it's just us?
No, it was worldwide. In fact, Daniel and Revelation studies were happening in Europe and everything completely separate from William Miller.
Okay.
They were discovering a lot of the same things.
You said that 50 people followed through or asked the question. So those 50 people, did they go on to make other denominations? Were they all Adventist or what?
Yeah, let me have a prayer just because we're at the end of our time, and then we'll keep talking. But that way, if we just got to edit the thing, or if other people got to go, we'll at least close with prayer on what we discussed. But then I won't run away. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for your love and your grace, and we just ask that you'll continue to lead us, not so much in having to figure out times and dates, but just to understand. And it's exciting to know the times and dates as you laid them out in the past, so that we can see that you see with clarity, that you see what's coming ahead of us, with clarity. And we can have confidence and assurance that even though it looks like everything else is coming unglued around us, you're already saw it. You know what's coming. You're in charge. We only have to be focused on how to be connected to you and be serving you, and you can take care of the rest. So we just thank you for that opportunity to understand those things. And mostly we want to know you more clearly so that we can share you more effectively, that your spirit work in us both to understand and to carry out the gospel commission. In Jesus' name, amen.
Working.
No, the microphone.
So yeah, Shady, what John was saying about it was definitely more than the United States. That was true. We have, when I say we, now I'm talking about Adventist history. We have written down and recorded a lot of what occurred in the United States, especially around that whole learning, understanding, and following through. It was the largest here. It was specifically largest here in the United States because of the connection in Revelation about the beasts and the fact that the United States was opened up to leave the dark ages behind, to have opportunity to grow and know and understand. Even at that time, we were experiencing still a lot more freedom to question and think and learn and to know than they were in, say, Europe. But it wasn't just in the United States, like John's connection. Oops, sorry. But it was specifically a movement that was supposed to kind of be spearheaded out of the United States to the rest of the world. And that's, again, connections in Revelation and the beast power and so on. So to the second part of your question, which was, I had it a second ago, now I lost it. Tell me the second part again.
What?
Oh,
Who were the 50?
Who were
Were they
the
all
50? Yeah.
Adventists, or did they go off and do other?
So the 50 who referred to themselves at first as Millerites, what happened was they weren't thinking about starting a denomination. They weren't trying to make up a denomination. They just went back to the drawing table to say, we are sure that God showed us these dates correctly, but we must have misunderstood something. And so they began to continue to meet together. Miller was there. He died not too long after that. But others who were meeting together, it grew into what the rest of the denominations started to call those Adventists, right? And then it was a long time later that there was a denomination, 501c3, that became what is now known as the Seventh-day Adventist denomination. So long story to get from point A to point B there, but the point is that in that beginning small group of 50, there's some pretty, what I think are exciting things that happen in stories as God, the next thing he pointed them to actually was about the sanctuary and about Sabbath and the sort of the connection to what Sabbath has to do with any of this. All of which we, not too long after 1844, already began to run off in wrong directions with. And so those of us that are Seventh-day Adventists still, and if we have read our history, even in our own records, we call them the testimonies, it actually, you can see all that happening and confusion here and confusion there. But to me, what it really was about was a small group that would learn and grow, that would begin in history. Then as we look back, we can see they began to show and to share some very significant things about God. Now, James White, which is Ellen White's husband, was kind of interesting because he was quickly a strong proponent, not only after 1844, but before. And he was a pretty significant preacher kind of guy. All of these people, whether they ended up as Adventist or we have a few other things, I think Jehovah's Witness actually is connected back there, because as they hit ideas like Sabbath, there would be people like William Miller actually who never accepted the Sabbath connection. but James White did, and then Ellen White. And if you read sort of the beginning of her ministry, really what I'm going is the big connection was God knew out of all of that, what we were going to need was this very special understanding about God written down in a book called Desire of Ages. So all the rest of it is, in my mind, sort of backdrop, scenery. You know, we have people getting it, people not getting it, people arguing, people whatever, going right, going wrong. But all the while, God was giving people the opportunity to learn basically what I call go into the most holy place and see him face to face. And even though that were being rejected in a large way, he made sure it was put down and recorded in a way that now you've experienced it. Because when you have read some of what you read in Desire of Ages, you read that and you go, yeah, Bible's wonderful and amazing. And I'm not saying the Desire of Ages is the Bible, but there's something amazing when we get the clarity. And then we go back and we read it in the Bible and we go, wow, see, that was an amazing Jesus. And I think that just like the Old Testament for the Jews in Jesus' time became kind of an obstacle to their understanding, in the era through the Dark Ages and coming out of the Dark Ages, even the Bible has been kind of an obstacle. You know, you read it and you go, oh, God's whipping up with his wrath over here and over there. And people have all kinds of ideas they say they're getting from Scripture, but they're getting it from using parts and pieces of it and filling in their own ideas in the middle. And then we get over here to 1844, and what I see as each time God did a prophecy, he provided this amazing gift in each prophecy when it was concluded. Like Moses and the prophecy of getting Israel out of Egypt, the sanctuary and the activity there at Mount Sinai was the big gift. And then you get Jesus era, and Jesus is the gift. And he's the biggest, always the biggest, most important gift. But in 1844, out of that, the real gift was Desire of Ages, Christ Object Lessons, Thoughts from Mount of Blessings, so that we could have the chance to see and understand what had kind of been covered up and made confusing. Anyway, so that's what I'll say about that. I don't know enough. I didn't do enough research to be able to explain totally the connection with Jehovah's Witness. I know that the Mormon group started before 1844. It was like what I see it as is Satan was creating a diversion before the real thing. He knew something was coming. At the end of the 2300 days, I can guarantee you, Satan had that date figured out. And then he watched William Miller figure it out. And so he had his distraction planning going on all through there. And then, of course, as the 50 grew into a deeply studying group, larger and larger, it also got hit with every kind of fanaticism and confusion, because the devil, he's not sitting still. When the truth starts getting figured out, he's got to do everything he can to stop it. So there's a lot of significance in that to the idea of an Advent movement. And I say it with that little bit of pause only because we have gotten as confused today as the Jews did with theirs. And so the answer is not really about the Jewish nation. It's not really about the Adventist church. It is about the truth about God that Jesus delivered 2,000 years ago, and that he has been working, tirelessly, for sure, starting in 1844 to bring about a conclusion of this revelation of the truth about God. That to me is the important pieces that connect with your question.
Bobby?
Yes.
Can I offer something?
Sure.
I don't know if
Jump in.
Barb and Shady are online, are they?
Yeah, they're still on.
Okay. So yeah, as I said before, I don't come from this tradition. So, and I jumped in at maybe about 45 minutes ago. So I did get the,
Got
specifics
most of it.
about.
Yeah, you got most of
Okay,
it.
okay. So my thought is this, that what you're explaining and the way you're explaining it is reasonable. And I'll say it this way, that if, say, you guys know Star Trek a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So Spock would say, he would just say one word, he'd say fascinating. So, in the Star Trek cosmology, they're going around discovering new places and all that kind of thing. So for me, from the very beginning, when I've heard about these things, that's what it was. It was a discovery of really new things, of different, like different, almost sort of like different language, or what have you, like in Star Trek. But I think the reason that it's at this point for me is what you're presenting and how you're presenting it is reasonable, is because when I look at some of the whys behind the revelation of certain things at certain times, right? It pulls into some of the core things we know, that 2 Peter 3:9, he's not slack concerning his promises. He doesn't want any loss, that sort of thing.
Right.
And so in terms of the specificity of dates or intersection of history, to me, he knows, because of knowing all things, that in order for people to not be lost and to be saved, that they have to take the remedy. They have to cooperate with what he's saying in all the things that you're saying about the sanctuary and the blood, right? I mean, that is a great question, is on the blood, is how does blood cleanse us?
Right.
It seems like a contaminant most of the time. In fact, you're not supposed to eat certain things with blood or whatever it is, So, so to a lot of the core things that I now know, and grateful for your dad in about 6-7 years ago, it makes some sense to me in a way that the physician, the great physician, knows when his patient will turn, and he keeps the rapport and the bridge. We would say in Hawaiian, the word is pilina, the bridge for the patient to come back to him, wander off, come back, and all of that. And then sometimes for him, the physician, to intervene, and the patient knows that, okay, wait a minute, this is painful. I didn't expect this, but maybe I need it, and it seems like the way of salvation, the way of healing, is going to come when the timing is right. As far as the revealing things, as far as that sort of thing. And of course it is with the student. The teacher will show up when the student is ready to learn. So in that aspect of things, I don't struggle with what you're talking about. It's still super fascinating to me. And I used to strain from it. I used to run from it and say, no, we don't need this kind of information or to study it, because it really pulls into kind of cult-like exclusivity or that sort of thing, But
Well,
when you start, yeah.
I was gonna say, Wendell, that two things, what you just said about that cult thinking, that's partly what you sort of see me even kind of being, because I'm still somewhat trying to make sure I know how to present this particular topic and not generate cult type thinking, because we've done way too much of that, right? So if there's something, for instance, that's significant about 1844, it's got to be something that isn't cult or exclusivity, right? So that's one. The other thing I was going to say that's kind of beautiful about your metaphor, as you were describing the patient doctor thing in this scenario, I was thinking, I was sort of visualizing God working, but the patient is the whole planet and the whole history
Yep.
of the planet as one patient, right? And
Yep.
so it's instead of each, which it's each individual, but in your context, the way you're describing, I was like, yeah, and like he's working with the entire planet over the entire course of history and future yet still coming a bit as that patient as he's carefully working with it. So that's kind of cool.
And to that, right, he's working with people who existed before Christ, who could never really believe in the first name, last name, Jesus Christ,
Right.
and confess with their mouths a person named Jesus, surname Christ.
Right.
But all the concepts are there, and then
Yeah.
we know that our body is the temple of the Holy Spirit and all of this stuff. And I mean, even to what you're saying about Desire of Ages, when I've dipped my toes into it and felt, whoa, this water is pretty frigid, I don't have much comfort here, but I look at it from a slightly different standpoint now, which is basically Scripture is writing.
Yeah.
You know, and if we were to look at it a slightly different way, that before the Bible was written and distributed, before the printing press, before any of that, you know, before women held places of what we might call societal importance, and before they could read, and what, you know, is very male-centric world in history past, you know, God's Spirit was still moving.
Yeah.
And the bigger plan to me that I see is how does he get the patient to be receptive to wanting to be healed? What does he do without forcing them to say, okay, you guys all line up, and if you just take a step forward, I'm going to heal you, as opposed to, he wants the healing to stick, right? He doesn't want people to, you know, go back and forth. He wants us to be really, really changed, transformed, right? So that's a process. And I think the timing of the specifics that you're speaking of and the way that you're presenting it, it is, in my opinion, as being from a different planet than your planet, it is actually quite reasonable.
Yeah. Well, and I love my understanding, even though it's not finished. Now the difference is it's not about an exclusive group. It's not about even the history of that group. It is really about the gospel that is the whole story of this patient called planet Earth, and even involves the universe, right? And to me, when it starts connecting in that large of a way, like cleansing the sanctuary, what does it have to do with the whole picture? Then that's something worth getting excited about. So thanks for the input, Wendell. That was nice to hear.
Yeah,
all right, well,
thank
I'm
you.
gonna hop off. You guys are welcome to keep going. Sabbath will be on, which parable is next, John?
Let me look real quick here.
And then Sabbath afternoon, I will be there this Sabbath afternoon at 2:30. It's kind of open. We'll leave it open because we may want to discuss more on parable or anything else you guys have been working on, but keep it in prayer. All these little connections that are happening everywhere for all of you, to be able to share a little bit of this good news about God in every way we can, because as we learn to do it more effectively and with more clarity, the goal is, as Wendell was pointing to try to bring about a healing of this patient, or as many of the persons as part of this patient as possible. So whether it's Bangladesh or Oregon, I think it's quite exciting.
Yeah, for sure. So the next chapter is other lessons from seed sowing.
Okay,
So it's not specifically a new
parable.
parable. If we want a new parable, then the next one would be like unto leaven.
Well, what are the chapters from the Bible it gives at the top of that? Under-
It doesn't. It's just
Oh, it
got,
does.
if you look at it, it's just got a ton of quotes from all over Scripture.
Oh, yeah. Well, then actually, I think we should, skip that one and go, what's the next parable?
Like unto leaven.
Like unto leaven. So let's go to that one. Maybe you can post that. When you post it, you can put the specifics out there that will be on like unto leaven for Sabbath.
Yep. So that one's in Matthew 13 and Luke 13.
Okay. Wow, really? Same in both. That's unusual.
Yep.
All right, Shady, good enough workout for tonight?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Barb, for bringing up the good questions. Good to see the rest of you.
Thank you. Thank all of you for the discussion.
Good
Yeah,
night,
let me
everyone.
know. Let me know what your thoughts are on that end of the 2,300 days section there, Barb.
Okay, I already opened it up. I think I'm on it.
Barb, stay on for a second.
Okay, I'll talk to you guys a little later.
All right.
Bye.
Is
Thank you,
anyone else
bye.
gonna stay on besides Barb and Shady?
No, and
Along
I was just gonna tell Barb about I'm dressing up for Halloween tomorrow, and I was gonna have to dress up too.
Well, I did have a kind of a general question if there's anybody else that's going to stay on about Adventism. So if not, it's okay. We'll catch it another time.
Yeah, you can shoot it at me and see if I can mangle it. What's the question?
No. Well, okay, so really it has to do with wondering you know, along with these Zoom sessions, is there a group of people that has reformed, kind of like officially or unofficially, from sort of like recovering Adventists or whatever you want to call them? You know, that that you know of? Is there either a movement or is there a, that type
Well,
of thing?
there's Jennings movement.
Yep.
Common Reason. There's
Yep.
Ty Gibson.
Yep, I know Ty. I visited his church actually.
David Asherick.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a number of people on the Seek God's Character stuff.
Yep.
Graham Maxwell. You're familiar with him.
Yeah.
So there's quite a few groups that have found and at least at some level understood the importance and the significance of God's character.
Yeah.
Internally, there's a lot of debate and argument over Ellen White, but one of the things that I do find to be a general truth is that the groups who seem to be on the character of God are pretty accepting of Ellen White. They don't struggle with it, whereas a lot of the hardliners seem to take a stance sometimes against her. Not always. Even the hardliners will misuse her. But anyway, that might be another connection between all of those groups. But I don't know. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, it does. For the most part, I really enjoy Jennings' approach and follow, the methodology. Sometimes I don't know if what he's positing about Ellen White is for or against, the truth. In other words, like I don't know if he's making her out to be at times in error or to be saying the truth, which is
I watch almost everything that he does. I mean, we watch him every Sabbath morning and and all of that. I've never heard him use her as being in error.
Okay. So it's that way. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that helps.
Yep.
I mean, I guess part of it is that I don't know the subtext enough to sometimes to follow along and go, okay, yeah, he's
Yeah.
saying that she agrees. So,
Oh, that guy amazes me. I mean,
well, I
he's got
appreciate
a
that. It's just to navigate.
yeah, he's got a
Yeah.
brain that's, the size of
Yeah.
3 watermelons. So it just
Yeah.
amazes me how much he does. Have you ever
Yeah.
read any of his Sabbath school? I mean, he does those every week.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just
The
read
research,
his
right?
Sabbath school stuff and
Yeah.
the research he does.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, and to that, I think it's inspirational. It's helped me to soldier on, to not settle with what I've been taught necessarily,
Well, none of us should, honestly. I mean, that's being intellectually honest and understanding that, that who knows, there's who knows how much God needs to or wants to reveal to us before he comes again.
Yeah.
But,
As time goes on, it seems to me that it becomes less and less and less about a group.
Yeah.
And more about not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as in all those uniting who are willing to be open to the Spirit of God leading in their lives and coming to know him better. Just as it was in 1844. It's like people came out from every denomination. They came out from everything under the sun, all for the one common goal of knowing God and being ready to meet him. And that is where we're going again. So, it's useful to know where people are coming from, but at the same time, I think we should be fostering more and more of the independent spirit, not as in I'm blazing a trail on my own, but the independent spirit that says, okay, that's interesting. That really sparked some thoughts in my mind. Is it true?
Yeah.
And go back to studying, like, that's not what I heard when I was growing up. So is it true? And go study it. Like, I will not take Tim Jennings' word for anything. I go, that's interesting. I've never heard that, but I go look it up and I decide whether or not I believe the same thing, but not because somebody said it. No matter what group they're from. Like when Bobby, like we talked tonight, and I can tell you when I hear something that I haven't heard before, I go look it up and I read it and I go, if I can't find it, and sometimes there are things that aren't as plain as day. Like you can't just go read a paragraph about it or whatever. It requires knowing God to even get to that conclusion. You just, it's not written. Plainly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like Jennings would say that there's a reason why in medical school they have 3 years of pathology and then 1 year of remedies. So it's tilted that way to understand the bigger picture and how the thing works. And then they come around to go, okay, well, we've got these remedies, only a quarter of their medical school, according to what he says, having gone through it. And I get it. I know we are to test out things, but kind of ironically, John, I look at it the other way. As we go into the future, I actually do want it to be about a group because that was like a beautiful time for me when I was part of a group. And there was cohesion, and there was some good building, and there was fun, there was discovery together and all of that. And I'm not saying that I need the Kool-Aid in that just for those things, but coming from being away from a group for, it's going on a decade for me. There's just a lot of times feeling, quite disconnected, so I'm just saying that that's how another way of looking at it is.
Yeah, I totally understand, and yet when I look at it, the idea of going back to church, I feel disconnected from their function. Meaning not disconnected from them as people, but disconnected from what that represents in my old life. Meaning I was, such a Pharisee then, and there's still Phariseeism in my heart, don't get me wrong, that I have to battle with, but I don't want to go back to Phariseeism. That's the fear, right? So I'm not afraid of being in a group. I just don't want to be in a group of Pharisees. But anyway, yeah, I hear you. I do totally. And in fact, I think COVID is kind of, bringing that kind of thinking to the forefront. It's like, as we're all kind of separated from the groups we were part of before, and it's helping us to think about it and consider it.
Yeah. Well, we keep, like Charlie's saying, keep wondering, keep testing, and keep asking, right? Keep knocking, keep all of that, right? So I guess, right, seek God's kingdom first, and all these things will be added to you. One way to think through it, I guess.
Oh yeah, that's very true. Very true. Oh man, I was listening to the Ministry of Healing the other day, and there's this whole section in the back of Ministry of Healing called The Essential Knowledge. And then there's chapter 35, A True Knowledge of God, chapter 36, Danger in Speculative Knowledge, chapter 37, The False and the True in Education, The Importance of Seeking True Knowledge, The Knowledge Received Through God's Word. Dude, those chapters totally hit on exactly what we're talking about right now. And so, I mean, I know that, maybe there's some issues there because it's Ellen White, but I mean, she's basically saying what you're saying. She's saying that all true knowledge comes only from God. That's who we seek it from, right? I mean, she's reiterating all that thinking. And she's definitely, I would say, out of all the writers I know, she is very non-denominational in her teaching. Very much so. I mean, so anyway.
And I mean, to that, I know because of the great profundity of her writing, she just, it was just volumes and volumes, right, of things. I tend to actually like to read without knowing the attribution and just judge it because of what it says.
Well, that's a good attribute to have, actually, when looking at stuff. What you just said, it's a good way to approach reading and studying.
Because I mean, even in one regard, we know that Satan knows Scripture very well. But if we test and see, what is being said and what it means, I think we can discover whether something is, genuine or is a counterfeit.
Yep. Totally agree. Well, I got to get going, but good discussion tonight, guys. Thank you for everything and for all the participation, and look forward to maybe seeing you guys on Sabbath.
All right. Take care.
All righty.
See,
good night.
Good to hear from you, Charlie. If he's
Charlie.
there. Your voice sounds a little lower. Are you having a cold or something?
No, I've been working my tail off, so probably not enough sleep.
Yeah. I noticed something a little different.
But I'm pretty tired. But I'm happy and doing good.
Well, good. All right, we'll get some rest and we'll catch up later, Charlie.
Okay.